Thank you everybody for coming to the CGA Speaker Series, and thank you Newport News for joining us. There are flyers on your tables for some upcoming CGA and GIS related events, so please look at those and keep an eye out on our listserv and our social media. We'll have time for questions kind of at the end of the presentation, but yeah, make sure you grab some pizza if you haven't already, and I hope that you enjoy.
Hi, thank you guys for joining us today so we can talk about GIS and local government. I know that when I got my job working for local government, I really didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing. So even after going through all of the GIS classes and certificate program, it was still a surprise to me. And even when I started looking back at what I'm doing today, it's changed so much, I had no clue what I was going to be doing. So I think this is going to give you guys a good opportunity to kind of see the possibilities that are out there. Every local government is a little bit different, but especially as you're starting to think about jobs for the future, you can just kind of keep these things in your back of your mind, the questions you want to ask, should you choose to work for a local government, and so that you could be interviewing them too. So we're going to talk about organizing chaos and empowering decisions, because that's pretty much what we do on a day-to-day basis. And because we joke around, because guessing where stuff is just doesn't work. And for a long time, that's kind of how things were done. A lot of local government information was just anecdotal or just experience-driven. People just knew where the problem areas were, where we get a lot of code calls, where do we have to mow, where do we have to do all these things. So it's really kind of taken a turn as we improve our data collection abilities, as GIS has grown, as local governments realize, wow, what we can do with GIS, what we can do spatially. And really kind of keep tabs on that, and then they can make more data-driven decisions. So we're going to kind of start off introducing ourselves. So I'm Jess Wyatt. I am the GIS analyst. There's actually 7 of us on our team. So 3 of us are here today, and the other 4 are holding down the fort. Just my background, I was a graduate from William and Mary, but my background was geology. And then when I graduated, I really didn't know what I was going to do, and fell into teaching. So I taught earth science and I taught chemistry and AP chemistry for about 18 years, and then COVID happened, and then I had to teach AP chemistry online to a bunch of people who didn't want to turn on their cameras, and teaching the lab science like that really didn't work. So it was really hard. I was spending a whole lot of time behind a computer, and I was like, you know what, let me see what else I could do. So when I was in college, I did do maps as part of my major. I also worked on campus digitizing geologic maps. And so I said, well, let's see what GIS has to offer now, but it had been like 20 years, so I really didn't know how much it had changed. And I found the Center for Geospatial Analysis here, found their certificate program at the time that they were offering, and jumped in head first, and within the year I was working for the City of Newport. So I've been there now for almost 3 years.
Yep.
So, and this is where I met these lovely people. So.
My name is Zach Long. I graduated from undergraduate with a degree in Asian Studies. I graduated in 2008 just as the Great Recession was happening, which meant that because I did not, for that my undergrad, I had no real job experience. I never did any internships. I could not find any job. So like many people in my cohort, I did a bunch of part-time jobs until I then got my master's in international studies at Old Dominion. And while I was there, I saw that they had a graduate certificate program in GIS. So I started taking classes there while I was working on satisfying the language requirement for my master's. And I ended up just going from GIS job to GIS job. I've worked about 4 years in the private sector with GIS, one with Liberty Tax Service, which is you've probably all seen the commercials. They're the tax preparation people that have the people dressed up as the Statues of Liberty waving outside their signs. Well, the thing is, they're a franchise-based company. So all their data where their stores are is map-based. So I worked in their mapping department for about 2-3 years. Then I went to another company, Pitney Bowes, which does a lot of mail service, worked there. And then I moved on to City of Norfolk, which is across the water, working as a GIS technician for the real estate assessor's office. And then finally moved over to this side of the water and working with City of Newport News. And I'm currently working on my master's in GIS with Penn State with their online program. If you choose to do a master's in GIS, that is a pretty good, that's a very good program. I'm pretty happy with it, but there's a lot of good master's programs now, especially online ones. So keep that in mind if you're going to be doing stuff like that in the future.
Hi, I'm Nicole Vick. I went to Longwood and I had an environmental science, I got an environmental science degree, and one of the, we had several classes where we utilized GIS, and that's kind of just where I fell in love with it, and I decided that that was going to be my career, and so I, started pursuing it out of, once I graduated, and then I decided to get a graduate certificate from UConn. That was all online, and that was really great. And then I guess we're going into our work history. I worked at a company called Team Fishel, and they are contractors for Dominion Energy. So I made maps for them. Basically, anytime you see like Dominion crews or people who work for a contract for Dominion doing work on poles or transformers, someone like me would make a map that showed them exactly the pole that they were going to work on and all of the things they were going to either attach, remove, cables, all that kind of really fun stuff. And so I did that for a while, and then that's when I started here at the city.
So none of us followed the same path to get here, and that's true of the other four back at the office too. So we have people with a planning background, engineering background, biology background, and yet we all are working in the same place and have the common skill set. So there's many different paths to working in GIS and working for the local government, and you all probably all have a different story as well. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what working for local government looks like, and especially with GIS, and some examples of some of the solutions that we've helped develop for our fellow City of Newport employees, and then tips of things that just keep in the back of your mind if you're thinking about pursuing a job in GIS in the future, not just in local government, but just out there, some things that you guys can do to help better prepare yourselves, and then we'll have time for questions, but at the end, we don't have to wait to the end. If you have questions, just feel free to stop us in between. Okay, so I'll put this up here because this is something to keep in mind, that all local governments and their GIS support does not look the same. And I have two different scenarios up here, but usually it's somewhere in between. So one of the models for GIS support it's decentralized. So you might have an IT department in the center, and they may, house the servers and maybe do a little bit of database management. But then most of your GIS work is done in the individual departments. So you might have these super users, we call them, and you might have one in a planning department, and you might have one or a couple in public works department. But they're all pretty much separate from one another. They may keep their own data sets that they're each using individually. So you might get some different silos of information, and they're not necessarily all talking to one another. Some localities will have a little bit of communication, a little bit of crossover, but this is kind of how Newport News kind of started. This is what we've moved to, is a more centralized GIS support system. And like I said, we have 7 people on our GIS team. We still have some power users in these departments, some people that are a little bit more comfortable with GIS, or maybe they can't do everything that they need to do in the custom apps that we've designed for them, so we get them basically we help them set up their Arc Pro project, and they work out of just one Pro project with just the layers that they need. But that's not very many people that we have working on that. And there's some pros and cons to this. One of the pros, I think, to the decentralized model is if you're working for a local government, let's say you're working in public works, you know those data sets, and you know that stuff backwards, forwards, upside down, inside out. I don't work a lot with public works data sets. I'm not as comfortable as those data sets as some other people might be within even our own department, because I'm not in there a lot. So So that's just something that, you know, if you're centralized, you see all the data, but you might not necessarily understand it all, or what it's all used for. Another thing is that if you're over here in a decentralized model like this, you kind of do the same stuff every day, and you might not talk to your other power users in these other departments, and so there's not quite as much collaboration. Here, where we are, we collaborate with all these departments, and so we can understand how parks might need to use a layer of signs, and how public works might need to use a layer that's like representing signs, and pavement, and parcels. Our parcel data set alone has 80 different fields, and we don't have many different uses, or people that use all 80 of those fields, but planning might need 10 of them, and public works might need 10 of them. But we all keep it in one place, so that way it's one data set that gets maintained, and not, again, duplicate data sets or disparate silos of information. Another thing to consider over here is that you might be restricted with budget. When you're like this, which is what we've moved to, we do have an enterprise model. So we have our data is accessible by pretty much anybody in the city. And we take care of also, we're incorporated with waterworks too, with Newport News Waterworks, so you have access to that too. So you have a bigger budget, you do more with it. And really what we've found is that in this model, we can move, we can create apps that moves the data maintenance, the data entry, the data collection into the hands of the expert knowledge users. And so we've really started to not do so much with the day-to-day data maintenance, but we've gotten into more of the app development, the custom app development of getting users to interact with their data. So, do you want to talk about Norfolk?
Yeah. So when I worked at the City of Norfolk, I worked in the real estate assessor's office. This is the office that maintains the tax parcel layer, and which is pretty much the basis of how local governments get their revenue, because your property taxes is what pays for everything. When I was working there, that's all I did. I just worked nothing but with the real estate assessor's office data, so just tax parcel data. And as Jess was saying, when you're in the siloed version, when you're in the decentralized version, you are siloed job-wise, but depending on what you want to do, as like the Norfolk Public Works Department had a team, if I remember correctly, of at least somewhere between 10 and 18 GIS users who knew the public works data sets like the back of their hand. And a lot of these were folks who wanted to only be in public works. They just wanted to be doing that type of stuff. So depending on what you want to do, it's not as bad. And one thing Norfolk was lucky was that we had a very engaged IT GIS team that did a lot to host collaborations between the different IT teams. So each month there would be a liaison meeting for all GIS users from all the departments would come together, meet at IT, we would have a monthly meeting, just talk about what we're doing. So you can still get some of that collaboration. It's just you're going to need to have a centralized IT team to be kind of on top of that, or at least someone who's willing to be on top of that. And the thing is, one of the reasons why a lot of city governments really start with decentralization, we're starting to see this move to centralization, is that GIS usually started in a department like real estate assessors, because they're the ones maintaining the tax parcel layer. Or they're starting in public works because public works is maintaining all the sewer assets, all the water assets. So there was a department that was dealing with all the maps and all that data at one time before we started seeing like QGIS and Esri products coming to be able to make that to more of an IT type situation.
So like a good example of this is just mowing within the city. And we have 10 different departments that handle mowing. So
Yeah.
it's parks. Parks alone has like 4 different subsets for just parks and recreation. And then PD and the fire department handle mowing on their properties. Redevelopment, sheriff workforce,
Economic
waterworks, yeah, economic development. So all of these entities within the city maintain they're responsible mowing areas, but they were kind of keeping track of that on spreadsheets and not ever looking at it on a map or, Shane doesn't approve. So a spreadsheet is not a geodatabase. So what we have worked with them on is mapping out all these locations, mapping out all these areas. Some of them, they knew that they mowed them, but they weren't even on their lists. We reviewed and sat down with all of the department heads and all the people that were in charge of that and kind of was like, okay, this one needs to be mowed, who's going to mow it? Looked at kind of the distribution of the workload too, because if they can't handle it, then they need to contract out, and then how much is that going to cost? And then we also incorporated code violations. So when a citizen would call in and complain that the grass is too high, there's a process for where they have to get a notification from the city to mow it, and then they get their second notification and it finally gets mowed. So they were looking at these properties that were just recurring problems, so that way they can get, they knew that it was probably going to have to be mowed and they could take care of it more quickly. So that's been a whole process where they were keeping track of all that separately, and we've kind of collaborated with them and brought them together and given them some ways to visualize that. So, anything else? No. So, yeah. So really most places are somewhere in between here. So it's just something to keep in mind. So we do support every single department within the city. These are some of our top users though. We work a lot with the planning department, so I work mainly with them. We we can all do pretty much what we're, she can jump in and make a planning map if I need her to or something like that, but we just kind of, how we divide the workload of who's the main responsibility. So I help planning with any time that there is a land use case that's coming up where a citizen comes in and says, hey, I want to get a conditional use permit because I want to be able to use my land differently than the city says I can. There's a process for them to apply and go before the planning commission and all that, so you have to prepare maps for them to do that. We do area plan maps. I did one for the Lee Hall area. Nicole did one for Hilton, Greater Hilton area, so we work with planning, and it's just a whole big document where they go in, the planners go in, and they analyze what they want this area to eventually look like, and so they have to have the maps that support that. Land disturbances, Zach does a lot of work with that, and Howard, and
When new buildings are built, essentially.
So with Parks and Rec, Nicole does a lot of the support for that. One of our other coworkers, Carrie Lynn, doing a lot of the park assets. We spent the summer collecting 5,000 assets.
Yeah.
So going out in the field, and we kind of got them started and then developed the app for them and said, here you go, have fun. And so they've kind of taken it over, and they're entering their signs, their benches, their trash cans, their picnic tables, their grills,
Playground
equipment, doing condition assessment on it, knowing the value of it, knowing how much it's going to cost to replace it, and then that incorporates with our asset management system, which is a GIS-based system. Park Finder app, if any of you had Brian Pierce as a professor for your intro lab, he developed that. He used to work with us. So it's a little Park Finder app, and you can get to that on the GeoHub and see that. I do a lot of support for the fire department, helping them with their 5-year accreditation process, which is nothing but looking at their data and their response times and where they're having incidents, and kind of trying to take a database approach of analyzing how they can do things better. Also looking at target hazard analysis, looking at land use of parcels and saying, well, this is where I have a lot of heavy industrial use, and I've got these big buildings, or I've got apartment buildings that are multi-story, and kind of planning out where they are in the city, and then going out and inspecting them and making a priority based on where your highest risk is. Keeping track of red and yellow tags. So this is when the fire marshals go out and do their inspections. I built a survey app for them to tag equipment, and they can take a picture of it, and they can keep their documentation that way. Public works. So we deal with stormwater, wastewater, missing assets. We have a whole workflow with that, where they're out in the field, they notice, hey, I'm supposed to have something here. It's not in the map. we have a process for them to put that in, and then Zach reviews it and puts that in. Mowing, we mentioned, leaf collection. We have a nice leaf collection app that Nicole keeps up with, and so customers can see, or citizens can see, when Newport News will come by their street and hopefully pick up their leaves. Because in Newport News, they do it weird. They just, instead of bagging it, you just sweep it all into the street. And then they come with a big truck and vacuum it up. So. And then adopt a spot, which you'll see in a second. So we'll show you guys that example. So we're really involved in this whole process of data management. Sometimes the departments come to us and they're like, we have data. We don't know what to do with it. Or we have a question. Can you look at our data and help us? Sometimes we are involved because they have a question first, and then we're like, well, what are you doing? Do you have that data? No. A lot of times they expect us to just be able to pull it from the ether, which that's always fun. But then we talk to them and say, okay, what do you want to answer? What do you have? If you don't have it, how do we get it? We can help you design something to collect it. Sometimes they have better sources of where we might get the information from than we can figure out just with Google alone. And then, do we already have it somewhere else? Is it already being used by another department? Can we combine this with something else that might help you? Because again, they might not realize that maybe somebody else is also tracking this. And then looking at how we can organize that data, how we can build out a data model for them. Most of the time, they don't even know what they want until they see it, and that's a hard thing to get used to. And you're like, I don't know what you need to know, you don't know what I can do, and it really has to be an exchange that goes back and forth with them. And one of the things that we've found that's successful is just showing them examples of things that we've done for other departments, and then they're like, oh, that's cool, can I get one too? Well, what do you want to know? So we have an internal GeoHub and an external GeoHub, so where they can go and they can look and get ideas. And then when we get new directors and assistant directors on board, that's another thing that we've really tried to do, is to reach out to them and say, hey, you're just coming on board. This is what we have made already for your department. This is what we can do, just so you know. Now we're available here to help you. So sometimes you get people who don't even, again, realize what GIS can do, and sometimes you get people who are, coming in and they're like, oh, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to do it all. So we just try, you really got to be your own evangelist, I guess, of getting out there and spreading the good word of GIS and what it can do for people. Again, we collaborate with other departments, so we get people talking that would otherwise never even really have a reason to talk to one another. And then we help them, figure out how to have a historical method of backing up that data should we need it, and then finding ways to integrate it into their workflows through custom apps or dashboards or whatever. A lot of people collect a lot of data and it just sits there. And then they look at it in a spreadsheet and then it just sits there. And when you're dealing with spatial data, we know that that's hard to visualize. And I always liked the phrase of, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a map is worth 1,000,000, because it's absolutely true. And I've been in meetings where you put a map up on the screen, and this one was with the sheriff. It was looking at released inmates for just a year of where they were released to, and it was like, whoa. They had never even seen it visually of what that looks like on the map. And it really, really speaks a lot. So, you want to what? You want me to slow down?
Just say that looks terrible.
Okay.
So worse than I thought it was going to look. So this is the really invigorating part of the presentation. So schema.
Do you guys know what's the word schema? Have you heard it before? Data model? Yay. Domain?
Domains?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh, love it so much. Okay.
Oh, but he doesn't. I've never heard those terms before.
I'm fuzzy on the terms.
That's true. Okay, so I just wanted to cover this because I think we love seeing all the fun, apps that we can create and the beautiful maps that we make, but I mean, we have to start with, our fields and what we can put in those fields, right? And what all of our departments need from those fields. so specifically with the parks that she brought up, they, for all of their assets, they never tracked anything before, never weren't able to make work orders, which basically is just when someone needs to do a maintenance or maybe replace a bench, they will create a work order for an asset. And they would, they didn't do that, and then they didn't have assets to attach it to, which is basically just the point on the map for the asset. And so we had to, it wasn't me, it was, I think John Lesko worked on it first, but they worked a lot with the Parks Department to determine what fields they needed to have for any layer. So trash cans. What do you need to know about a trash can? This body style, the color, the lid type. I know, this is super exciting. Just other stuff like that. And so you really have to, again, it's things that, non-GIS people don't really think about, like how in the weeds you actually have to get with some of these data sets. So, all to say, ideally you want to capture all of that from the beginning. And that is super fine and dandy if you're able to do that, but a lot of the times they, I even had one just a couple weeks ago where someone in the Parks Department said, hey, I really need this field added to 10 layers. And, since we're in an enterprise environment, we don't all have access to just add a field. Like, you might be able to in your personal, file geodatabases and everything. It's a lot bigger process. So the best way that we have found is using an add-in for our catalog called X-Ray. And basically all it does is it takes your geodatabase, or a data set, well, whatever you want, I guess, anything, and you can export your schema into an XML file.
And if you've never done this, just even use like a nice clean data set that you have, just to see what it looks like. You just run the tool, and just to see what it tells you about that layer. It's not just what's, it's a lot more than what's in the application. So.
Yeah. So basically it'll put out, I know it looks terrible and I'm sorry, but basically this is the schema right here. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. You just open it up and it has, the name, alias, and then all your fields here and everything that you can change. So again, field name, type, length, description, alias, and domains. And so again, we just needed to add, one field to like 10 layers. So I just open up the schema, I put in the one field, copy, paste it to a bunch, and then I will save that, upload it to an empty geodatabase, and then Tammy, our boss, will just replace the old layer with the new one, and I load up all of our backup data into the new layer, and then voila, the field is there. And it's kind of similar for the domain process as well, although it's a little bit easier to add like one domain value. But yes, so also, so you can do, add, update, delete. Reorder is also big for us. We like to standardize kind of the flow of our fields. So we like to have the same 5 ones at the front, so that anytime you open up a field, it's going to have your facility ID, your life cycle status, so whether that asset is active, inactive, abandoned, removed. We do keep a lot of, historical data, so even if it was demolished, we like to keep that just for, replacement value, cost, things like that. But anyway, yes, reordering. And then domains. You guys all know what that is, but it's really important. Jess kind of touched on our power users, and we really like to, especially for, parks people and public works, again, they know the assets that they're working with. We don't really know that stuff, so we try to give them agency over their own data, but the way that we try to, make sure it's normalized is with domains. So we give them a pick list, and we have to, again, work with them a lot to say, what are all the things that you could possibly attribute to this one location? And so we try to make as many, options for them as possible, as many domains as possible, where we can.
GOL, and then pretty much everything that we do is right here. It goes from our computer, it goes to the cloud, it goes from the cloud, it goes to our computer. Hey, everybody's great, right? On my interview, I was asked if I had any experience with Enterprise, and I'm thinking Star Trek. Like, I had no clue what Enterprise even was. Really, I thought, I was thinking like AGOL being an admin or something like that. And I knew that enterprise software was like something that generally, that name is applied to software that is supported by like multiple systems kind of across, an organization. But that was the limit of my knowledge. So you might hear this term. Have any of you heard enterprise before other than Star? Okay.
They've all used it. They just don't know how to do it because our IT people won't let us teach it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So in local governments and other organizations, not just local governments, you will have a wide variety of deployments of ArcGIS software. And usually if you ever go to a conference and you go to these presentations, they'll ask, how many of y'all are AGOL users? How many of you are desktop users? How many of you are pro users? How many of you are enterprise users? And you see like a smattering of hands go across the room. Even at Analyst, which is mostly local government, everybody's doing something different, okay? So we are, Newport News is right here. Yes? Did I hit the right place?
You did, AGL Enterprise Portal.
Yeah, whatever, it's somewhere around. So we use Living Atlas too, but we're not, that's this one. That's just this. Yeah, we have this one right here. So we have our desktop stuff. We can publish from our desktop to ArcGIS Online. We can publish to Living Atlas. We can also publish to what we have is our enterprise portal. And this is an instance, kind of like AGOL, but it exists on our servers. And AGOL releases these updates quarterly with all new jazzy, snazzy tools. It's like, do this, and then sometimes stuff breaks. That's why we have this, is because when we control when it's updated. And we don't have a test environment for this before we update. We just kind of flip a switch and it goes. Some places do. Sometimes stuff breaks. But we can still sometimes anticipate that, and we can patch this as needed. They'll release little updates. The difference, if you are in this situation, there is a lot to kind of wrap your head around between what I can do here in the desktop in Pro, what I can do here in Enterprise, what I can do here in AGOL, and depending on what your end user asks you for, you have to decide which is the best place and how this is all going to go together and what your limitations of each one are. And that takes time, and that takes a lot of butt time to figure that out. And it takes a lot of extra effort, and just troubleshooting and trying stuff, and if it doesn't work, well, maybe I'll try it in here. We are currently on Enterprise version 11.2. They are on 11.4 right now. So we're not that far behind. But there's things in AGOL that I can do in AGOL that I can't do over here in Enterprise. Even if I'm still using dashboards here, and I'm using dashboards here because I'm on an older version. So we sometimes have to ask ourselves, well, what does our end user need? When do they need it by? Do I need to do it here? Do I need to do it here? And we originally tried to do it so that if it was meant for public consumption, it stayed over here. If it was meant for internal consumption, it stayed here, but that didn't really work all the time. So that's kind of gotten a little bit more fluid. There are ways to get some of this stuff talking to each other, but it's a little bit difficult, so we haven't quite done a distributed collaboration here yet. But so most of what you do, I think, still is in your ArcGIS Pro, working in your projects, working in your geodatabase, in your own geodatabase. But when you're in a multi-user environment, there has to be an exchange of this information. There has to be a way to get it between users and desktop, which is where enterprise comes in, and then also up to the cloud into your apps and stuff. So just realize that there's a variety of different ways that you could combine these two. John Lesko, who was a CGA student, graduated William and Mary, used to work with us. He did his summer internship over at what's Boy Scout camp?
Belmont.
Yeah. And his job was to kind of clean up their geodatabase system of management, which they had none. And I think he was able to lay out a plan for them, but not finish it because it was just a hot mess. And he called us up and met with my boss and I, and was like, "What do I do?" And he was showing it to us. Oh God, it's a hot mess. So having good data management and knowing and having like a plan for how you're going to organize this stuff, and being able to say, okay, I've got this layer that's hosted in the cloud, or in our case, what we do is we also register our data store. So that way, if you publish a hosted layer, you publish it, and it's just a snapshot of that data when you publish it to the web. But we have it so that we have our data store registered. So as our parcels are updated, as things are changed within desktop or within apps or anything like that, it's automatically updated. So that's another kind of good thing about having an enterprise portal. But he was working with like multiple layers that had multiple editors and multiple different versions, and then trying to reconcile it, it's just a nightmare. So working in a multi-user environment is definitely a lot different than what you're used to working for with just your individual projects. So, all right. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Have you ever seen this before? I love this analogy. So we talked about data collection, data preparation. We're involved, in all of that process, visualizing the data. What does it look like in an attribute table? What does it look like in a schema report? And then once you've got that all prepared, then comes the fun. Then comes what you get to do with it. So we get to now do analysis. You guys don't have to deal with all of this part because you're just handed the data a lot of times. Here you go, here's a nice pretty data set to work with. Have fun. And then you're doing this, right? So, but there is quite a bit of work that goes into this first portion. And then we can get in again into analysis and storytelling, and then building the tools that we're going to give to our end user that ultimately they're going to use to do their jobs better. So we have a lot of data, and a lot. We have like over 300 feature classes. We have over about a third of those are published in our open data layers. So that's part of our kind of open data initiative for the city, is getting that information out there to the public. So we do have a GeoHub portal, which I'll show you in a second. And then we use that to then curate that content and then turn it into web maps and apps and surveys and story maps and experience builders and custom dashboards. So,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah.
How often do you all work with like CNU or other people who have GIS? Like, I know William Mary, we have a GIS person. CNU, I believe they have a GIS person. Do they share data with you? Do you share data with them?
We have shared data with them. They really haven't shared data with us. I believe Johnny Finn's coming and talking.
Yeah, he is.
He got some aerials from us. He came and got some historical aerials from us. I worked with Federica last year with her GIS class. They had a really cool thing was trying to do community-based outreach. And so because I work a lot with the fire department, they had a group that was working with the fire department and looking at some of their data to figure out and propose the new location of the fire station, the next fire station. And what they actually came up with was where the fire station is going to go. So that was kind of cool. But I helped them with that. You made the...
Yeah, they, the CNU Center for, I don't know, students volunteering, I don't know the official name for it, I'm blanking on it, but...
They have to do community service, I think.
Yeah, so a student came to me and wanted help with building an experience for students to just be able to go and see all the places that are partner community volunteering. So I made an experience for them, and it's currently hosted on, well, you know, we host it, but it's on their website that students can access freely. So just like a few projects here and there. I don't know if they have a specific GIS professional though. When I was working with that student, it kind of seemed like, you know, there wasn't an official, I don't know.
They don't have like a CGA there.
Yeah.
They have professors that are big and heavy into GIS, but not
Yeah.
necessarily knowing all of the geospatial stuff. So when I went in to help them out with their project, I was walking around and listening to like what some of the other groups were doing, and noticed that their data wasn't projected, and I was like, yeah, if you're doing a analysis for anything area and stuff, which they were, I was like, you're gonna want to project that. So, and just offering advice that everybody realizes, you know. So I'll take you. Now's the show and tell time. This is fun. So feel free to, on your own, check out the GeoHub. Type in GeoHub Newport News, and you will see this. And you will also get to see our GIS viewer. This is what probably half of the people in the city think all we do is this. So they will say,
the most common question, can you open the GIS,
"You go in the
please?
GIS."
The GIS is broken, please fix it.
It's a
And
little
this is what
washed
they're talking about.
out, but yeah. These aren't even all of our layers that we have, but it's just our more common ones that people might need to see. And so you just tab down and see landscaping areas, or you can go into planning and development, and you can see future land use, and that kind of stuff. So it also incorporates some of our aerial imagery that we have. Not all of it, but some of it. So you can play around with that. That's always kind of fun, if it will load. And then it also has our, we have like a map gallery of some, you know, different things that we've done, some examples of the apps we've done, story maps, that kind of stuff. The last time I was here, I think 2 years ago, I said we were hoping that we would get to have a digital twin sometime soon, and so we've been working on that. One of our coworkers, Nathan, has put a lot of effort into this, and so it still is being tweaked and playing around with, but we flew LiDAR last year?
23, right?
Yeah. And so this is the result of our LiDAR, and he's kind of, you know, been playing around with this. He built this up with Boston's building model. But some of these are actually LiDAR-derived buildings, and then some of these are where he's gone into SketchUp and he's, you know, cleaned it up and made it look nicer. And then some will have a skin overlay, so we're just kind of playing around.
I think that one's that's from the mirror map.
Yeah, that's from that. So, anyways, it's just kind of fun. This is something that I did recently for, I had somebody planning, and she came to me, and she literally had like huge maps that were, I don't know, this big, so what is that, like 2 feet by 4 feet, something like that. And she's got a stack of them. It was 3 separate stacks, and she's like looking through, comparing the comprehensive plan from for 2030 future land use to the 2040 future land use to then what they're going to be doing. And she's like flipping through stacks and stuff and trying to figure out why things don't agree. And I was like, let me pull it into a dashboard for you. So that's what I did here, just so she could go through and review. And she was specifically looking for things where parcels for their future land use for 2030 don't match parcels for future land use for 2040. So that way they could sit there and talk about them and have a conversation about them together. And then in this case, this was research and development in 2030. Then it was office in 2040. I know the colors look very similar on the screen, but this is pink, I promise. And then what I did for her was she can go in here and propose a scenario where they want to change it. And then she can go in there and edit that. And then she'll see it when she makes that edit on here. She'll see what they want to change it to. And these were all of the parcels that, as I was doing this analysis, that I found out that, you know, there might be some differences in geometry between them, but I thought I signed into everything, apparently I didn't, boo. But just, I'm not gonna do it now, okay. So some of their, cancel. I broke it. Broke it, okay. So we're not gonna look at that anymore. So that's the problem that you get when you have stuff in AGOL and stuff in Enterprise, and you try to pull them in, you gotta log into one, you gotta log into the other. It's always gonna let you to log in. This is a dashboard that I'm working on right now. This is a mock dashboard where we're gonna eventually have it fed with live data. This is data that was handed to me by the police department. And they're like, we want a dashboard, we want it to be live, so the crimes are coming in and people can see them up on the dashboard. And so they can like sit there and they can interact and they can focus on just the crimes in the North Precinct. And what they found is that because of their data being sloppy and messy, what's labeled as a crime in the North Precinct is actually plotting down here, and plotting here, and plotting here, and plotting here. So we're trying to like help them visualize their data better so they can help clean up processes on their end. Great. So this will eventually, a version of it will be live on our GeoHub for as part of this open data initiative to where people can interact with it. You won't see the actual address, but we'll have it like to the block level. You want to talk about your hub?
Sure. So this is a litter cleanup program hub site that I created with one of our departments, Solid Waste. They are kind of the keepers of the Adopt a Spot program, but we have all kinds of litter cleanup programs, so it's not the only one. But they really wanted traditional, like we're tracking everything in spreadsheets. We want a better way to track it. We want a better way for people to submit litter cleanups. So I started this project in September 2023, and it just went live last week. So just to give you an idea, sometimes things take time. It's a lot of information mostly, but I also created some surveys. And I create my surveys in Survey 123 Connect. It's a bit of a difference between me and Jess here. She loves Survey 123 on the web, but if you get a chance to, I don't know if you guys have access to Connect, probably not, but it's just like a desktop version, basically.
I think our students can download it. I think I've given them permission to download it.
Okay.
We just can't install it on all the computers
Oh,
because
gotcha.
we gotta make choices. Choices are made
Yeah,
for
basically
things.
it's just a way to edit surveys in XLS format. So it makes a lot more sense for me. I have a lot of experience in Excel, so it's just really, really easy for updating and calculations, stuff like that. So anyway, this is just a super simple survey. I have some conditions on here, so they click Adopt a Spot, and then they can pick from their group. Look, another drop-down list, a domain I had to create. And then, they fill out other information, they put the location of their cleanup, just standard things for litter cleanup. I made a couple surveys like this for picking up supplies and things like that. And then, I'm not gonna go into everything. The only other thing I really developed for them was of course a map. And this is where they can see, oh no, it's not gonna load. Oh, there we go. It's going to show all of the cleanups that have happened. And we only have a couple years worth of data, so, it's not that great. But, we recently had, sorry, I have to highlight this, but recently had, animations available for symbology. So you can see this one's kind of ballooning up because it was within the last 30 days. Anyway, so they can filter by their group and see all the litter cleanups they've done, the hours, the pounds of litter collected. I think I actually had Issa work on this a little bit. I think she did my past 30 days. I think I've asked her to do that. So yeah, anyway, and then the other programs are pretty much all the pages are the same, but it's just a website that all of our citizens can go to, and then they can find their cleanup reports. And I don't have an example up, but once you submit this with Power Automate, we are able to do webhooks. So anytime someone submits a survey, it automatically generates an email, and so then the staff can see that a response was created and reach out to the people. Yeah, Zach, just go ahead and do drone stuff.
Okay, so one of my primary jobs is I am the drone pilot for the City of Newport News. I fly drones. This is one of our 3 drones. This is Skydio X10. We have a Mavic 3 Enterprise, and we have a DJI Phantom 4 RTK. All of our drones have RTK for enhanced precision. And I basically fly drone missions for all non-law enforcement and fire requests. So I fly for public works, tourism, planning, development. Anyone who's not law enforcement or fire who wants a drone mission, I'll fly. And a little short time, so I'll just go. So one of the most common things I do here is this is what we call the ROC, or Recovery Operations Center. This is a site in Newport News where basically this is where all the compost, mulch, and leaf litter goes to and is collected. And per Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, we're only allowed to have so much material on this concrete pad. So I fly this pad once a week with a drone, and I'm able to create. I'm able to create a 3D model, which will load, and from this 3D model, I can then calculate volumes of all these piles, create a report of said piles, and send that over to the solid waste folks, so that way they know how much material they have on the pad each week. Another thing that I will do is I will fly on a monthly basis. I have a certain number of construction projects that are done by the city that I then fly. Manager, and this is Ridley Circle. This is a housing redevelopment project that has been going on for the past 3 years. So I'll fly this once a month so we can get progress pictures and photos. And once again, like the neat thing so I'm on a program called Drone Deploy. This is what we use when I fly the drone and I get the imagery. The Drone Deploy is the software as a service that pretty much processes all the photos, so we don't have to do the processing on our end, which is nice. And once again, like anytime I do missions, I can create a 3D model, which you will do what you want, do what you're supposed to do. Yeah, I understand you guys do have your drones here, kind of, sort of, yes? Yeah, so like your drones are still mainly used by law enforcement and fire, but we're starting to see a lot more people like us, like Public Works IT, that are doing this. And this is probably about 50% of my job. So like if you go into GIS in cities, you can also not just be doing GIS. This is also another possibility of a job that you can do.
And he does flights for stormwater management areas.
Everyone who, except the exception of police and fire, because they have their own folks to do that.
So I know we're running short on time, but if you're interested in a career in GIS, do the Esri online training. It's there and available for you. Just go in there, start playing around. Do the MOOCs if you have a chance to. The cartography one is awesome. Stay up to date on software updates. They put out blogs that just saying like what's new. Arcade, being able to do custom things in Arcade is a great skill. Custom pop-ups. You can do a lot of things on the fly there with that. It really speeds up the experience for your users. HTML, Python, SQL. One thing that we didn't realize, I think, that we would be doing so much of is a lot of like design stuff. So Photoshop, Canva, that kind of stuff. Being able to have a good eye for design. I mean, we're making hub sites. We're making a lot of things that are just not just maps anymore, And we've worked a lot within the department to kind of standardize the look of a lot of our stuff. So get experience using the software and service online for AGOL, play around, survey 123, dashboards, experience builder, insights is going away, don't waste your time. So, instant apps are okay, but really we don't use them because they're so limiting. So I would really focus on experience builder, that's where they're pushing everything. Internships, so Issa was our lovely intern this past year. We unfortunately, I don't think we're gonna do a summer intern because we're getting ready to do a lot of construction, but we're talking about having a fall winter intern, so keep your eyes out for the listserv for that. Do an online portfolio, story maps are wonderful, they definitely will set you ahead of your other applicants. Or GitHub or whatever you want to do it in, you know, just do something online that people can look at and go, oh, I know this person can make a map. A lot of times we get a lot of weird applicants that they haven't ever touched GIS, so. Go to user conferences, so VAMLess is great. If you get a chance, go to Esri's conference. You can be a student worker, you can get free admission, they'll put you up in some awesome, your hotel was better than ours, so whatever. Get your Part 107 if you want to fly drones and have fun at your job. And good troubleshooting skills. So yeah, we use ChatGPT. I'll admit it. I'll have a problem with code, with Arcade or something. At this point, I'm like, I can't get it to do what I want it to do. Can you help me? And it'll fix it. So a lot of gremlins. We have a lot of gremlins with Esri software. So getting to know those gremlins so you can work around them is definitely a skill that's a good skill set to have. So.
I would also say the Esri community is your best friend. Issa will tell you how many times I've said this, but you are not alone. Someone has had the exact issue that you've gone through. If you just take the time to look it up in the Esri community, more than likely you're going to find someone that has a solution there. Even sometimes it's your exact same, like you're a public works employee and you're doing, anyway, I'm just saying, like it's really, really helpful. So I just think, taking the time to try and troubleshoot it on your own is going to help you go even further in the future. So definitely use it as a community. I use it all the time. Even posting questions in there yourself. If you can't find it, post it in there. Someone's going to respond.
And document too, because like we do so much and I will work on something and then not touch it for a while because I'm waiting for feedback for somebody else, and then 3 months later it'll come back and I'm like, ooh, what was that? And then, oh, thank God, 3 months ago I wrote down what this was. So it really does help. I really highly recommend it. Imagine if you had to do you still do the Sharks Lab, Shannon?
They're coming up on it next week.
So yeah. 3 months later, picking up Sharks Lab halfway in the middle of it, trying to figure out where you were. It's not fun. So if you guys have any questions, we'll be here. I know you might have to go, but feel free to email us. And sorry we ran a little over, but you guys have fun. Any questions from those people who come out? Yeah.
Yeah, how often do you work alongside other local governments, like the City of Hampton?
I have spoken with the person in the City of Hampton once to kind of show him what I was doing for the fire service. A lot of the data needs that we have are, for other municipalities that we might need, like their parcels or their road center line, that kind of stuff. We can just get that from their rest service. York County, I personally know some of them, so we talk a little bit more.
I mean, alongside, I don't think very often, but I think, bouncing ideas off them, we kind of do that. We'll see them at local meetings and things like that. Hey, I heard you're doing this for Norfolk. Maybe you could talk to me about that. The litter cleanup thing so actually the people in solid waste, they saw Norfolk present their litter cleanup website and said, hey, we want this too. And so we had a meeting with the people in Norfolk and kind of, they gave us an overview. And then, I kind of did a little bit more.
And for the drone program, I've flown for HRSD, which is the Regional Sanitation District. I've flown drone missions for them. We've done stuff with York County too, so There could be a fair amount of interoperability and sharing of stuff. It just depends on the situation.
Or at least we can reach out if we need it, but.
And we share a lot of data in the background too,
Yeah.
also. That's another thing you'll see with local governments.
And you share it to the state, which we appreciate, because
Yep.
then we send our student to region.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
How important, like, is, like, going to grad school and stuff for a career in GIS?
With grad
That
school,
is
do you
the
mean
million-dollar
master's
question.
just, or master's degree, or
well,
PhD, or?
You said you got a certificate.
I did get a certificate.
And then you guys were more like grad school experience, so like.
It depends on what you want to do. So if you want to be, if your goal is to be more of like art, and this is one of the nice things about local government. Like if you just want to, and I'm not trying to say this in a mean way, if you just want to be like that cog that's always like, you're doing data maintenance, you're doing stuff like this, and you're not interested in becoming a manager. A certificate, job experience, and certificates in coding will probably do you good. That you can get a master's if you want, but that might be a little bit of an overkill if that's kind of like the role, if that's what you envision yourself. If you want to be like that, you want to be the director of IT for City of Newport and City of Hampton, then a master's is probably going to be something that you're going to need, because like when I did my master's program that I'm doing now, I had two management classes. And that's something that those city departments, like that director of IT, he's going to want someone who has management experience or has background in management via classes for that candidate. But also the other thing is job experience is going to get you a very long way too. Like one of our coworkers, Howard, he's over 20 years, I want to say. And like 20 years working for the city in engineering, doing GIS, public works doing GIS, and IT doing GIS. Like that's 20 years of experience. That's essentially a master's in itself.
He's got so much institutional knowledge.
Yeah.
He's like a walking encyclopedia. Like he's great.
So it's going to depend on what you want to do. Which that's something you have to figure out for yourself. But the nice thing is that we're starting to see a lot more online GIS programs, which does help with the cost, but it is something you just have to figure out for yourself, and you've got time, so I mean obviously, but that's just something to think about.
I think also not just role level, but also kind of back to the decentralized, centralized. Where do you want to be? If you want to be more of a subject matter expert that does GIS, then maybe a master's, in a more, niche field that uses GIS is going to be your friend. Like you really just, it's hard to plan for the future, of course, but I mean, I did a graduate certificate, and so it was graduate level classes, but it was kind of repeat, concepts that I kind of learned in undergrad. So, but I did take a Python class, so that pushed me forward. So yeah, again, it's really just what are your interests? Are you trying to do a lot of programming? If you don't have that experience already, then that's going to help you in the future to take classes in advance. But you could also, some companies, I think, Newport News is really great about learning on the job too. You don't have to have all of the experience up front. You're going to come to some of these concepts while working there. So it kind of just depends.
How many of you are working on or have your GISP?
I'm working on it.
It's okay if you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really working on
Okay.
GISP. I think it's a big discussion in our
Yeah.
office.
I think
It's kind of a little gatekeeping.
I think it's more important if you're going to work for like a contractor, where having
Yes.
those letters after your name is going to win your company the contract.
Yep.
I think that if you want to go work private sector, getting your GISP is a great thing to do.
Yep.
You can start counting your class experience now, which is what I've done, and doing like this presentation. We get points for doing that kind of stuff, So, keeping track of those things over time, because I think it's minimum of 3 years experience. So I'm almost there. So, will I get it? Even though I have the experience to get it, maybe I will, but I'm also at a much different point in my life. So I had my master's already in it was geosciences, it was GIS, but will I go, I'm always learning. I learn every single day, new stuff about GIS and the job. I don't know that I would learn that in a classroom of, what is specific to the role that I'm doing right now. But there's so much information out there as we're going to these conferences, staying up to date on all this stuff, figuring out how to do it on your own, that, you can learn things you'll never learn in the classroom taking a master's program. I think that there are good ones out there. I myself personally, when I chose to do this one, I chose to do this one because it wasn't online. And I wanted something that I could talk to somebody, I could ask questions, I could get help. I had that. If you take an online, environment, you have to be able to do that on your own and not necessarily have that same interaction with people. And we bounce ideas off of each other all the time. And just, hey, how do you do this? I don't know. Have you ever done this before? Have you ever encountered this before? So I think there's a lot of that collaboration, and we get a lot out of that by talking to one another, by working with one another, that we wouldn't get if we were, there are jobs where you just sit at home and you're doing GIS all day long and you're working remote, and that's great, but you don't get that collaboration and you don't get to do as much, I think. So, yeah, I'm intrigued by the idea, let's say, of like a data science, couple data science classes, and I can always go and pick those up if I want to individually without seeking a degree. So,
Thank you.
I would say that more jobs, once again, unless it's really the contracting world, a lot of jobs now, as more masters in GIS are becoming available for those higher level jobs, more jobs are more interested if you have that master's than necessarily a GISP, because of a lot of the issues with the gatekeeping and the fact that people who have the GISP don't have to take the test, but new people have to take the test. So it's becoming it seems to be becoming a little less valuable than what it once was.
What's a GIS?
GIS professional. It's a semi-authoritative certification, but it's not like a land surveyor or engineer certification where it's a state sanction. It's a private sanction. So it's like where it says that you know GIS skills. If you want to go to a rabbit hole, you can look it up. It's
We actually have flyers upstairs because there is an entryway from your student role into the GISP. It's a paid experience. Like, you don't pay as you're collecting your points towards getting your GISP certification, but you do have to pay for the test and pass it in order to actually get that certification. It's not a certificate, it's a certification by a private entity. What I find for entry-level jobs, and I'm going to tell you all what I tell every student who ever asks me, entry-level jobs do not require anything generally beyond a bachelor's degree. You guys are going to come out of William & Mary stronger than a lot of other candidates because we push you all with your GIS skills. I'm not going to lie about that because I've had people tell me who interview our students versus other university students on what you all know. Like, I know some of you hate some of our classes because you're like, oh my God, so much time. But you will come out of it able to apply for entry-level positions. As you move up in your career, that's when I would suggest looking at having your employer pay for your master's degree or the GISP or whatever it is that you want to continue and further your experience. Going straight from undergrad into a master's degree with the thought of having a GIS job, if you have the degrees but no experience, that's not good.
Yeah.
You need experience.
Yeah.
Get the experience and let that experience also pay for your master's or your GISP.
And like John, our former coworker and former CGA student, and he got a certificate here too. He's in a master's program now at George Washington. And he's like, he's having a hard time because, you know, he graduated here, he did his certificate, he was working at the city at the same time, he has all this experience, and now he's in with some other students who just went, you know, straight from bachelor's to master's, but his professors just think that he has like no experience, just like, you know, they've never, oh, well, maybe one day you'll get a job at GIS, and he's going, you know, and he knows a lot, you know, just from working on the job and things like that, so.
And he was the drone pilot before me. I took over the drone program when he left. And I'm actually getting the city to help pay for my master's. So that's one nice thing about local governments. I had to work a full calendar year for my hire dates to be eligible for tuition reimbursements. So the city, tuition reimbursement from the city is never going to be the same as private sector. That's just the thing. But of course, my medical benefits are better with the city than it would be private sector on the whole. But yeah, definitely, like with local governments, you can get tuition reimbursement when you choose to do that master's. But as you said, work 2-3 years at least, get some experience on your belts, and that also gives you an idea. It also gives you time to see like what the field is, if you really like this, and if, because I can tell you, working full time and doing a master's program, it is hard.
It's hard.
And especially if you're trying to do like coding stuff, and if you're like me and you don't have that mind for coding and programming, but I still need to know how to do it, then it's even tougher because I'm doing an online one. So as Jess said, I don't have that collaborative environment that you guys have. But on the other hand, also Hampton Roads area, no one has a master's in GIS right now. So yeah, I kind of had to do what I had to do.
No,
but,
yeah, no program, there's no program in this area.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then from the hiring standpoint, because I have been on the hiring panels for GIS specialists and things like that, is those people that we get don't even have a, you know, certificate for the specialist positions that they're applying for. You know, some do, some have like a geography major with a GIS, you know, heavy GIS background or something like that, or they do have a GIS certificate. I don't think I've ever seen it. Carrie Lynn's master's is in
GIS, yeah.
I'm sorry, I
is
don't
hers
know.
in GIS?
Yes, it's
She might be
GIS.
the only one that,
Yeah.
yeah, that we had, so.
That's because she had the 4-to-1 program
She had
at her
4
school.
plus 1, yeah. But yeah, if you're going into academia, go that way. You know, you
Yeah.
want to be a professor of geography or GIS, then yes, I would definitely roll right out. But I think doing internships, getting that experience, getting your feet wet is a really good way to go and learn. You'll learn things faster. I know Issa probably felt like we were spraying her with a fire hose a couple days. It's okay. It's okay.
I had a great time.
So, any more questions?
Thank you all.
Thanks so much.
We'll come play anytime.
Awesome.